delighted to be joined for this session by Tim O'Hara, who is president of the Global Family Office at Rockefeller Capital Management. Now, you will all know the Rockefeller name. It is synonymous with wealth through the generations. And we're very pleased that Tim has joined us from the US to come and talk to us today. Tim, before we get on to Rockefeller in particular, you have a garlanded career in the world of family offices. And I think for our audience, it'd be great to hear from you a little bit about some of the experiences you've seen in the development of the family office business over the last few decades.
Thank you, Clyde, and thanks for having me, and Lily, for all your hospitality. It's a pleasure being here, and I do run the Rockefeller Family Office currently, so we'll get into that in a bit. I started in the family office space almost by happenstance, probably 30 years ago, coming out of law school. And at the time, it was a multifamily office, and I didn't know what a multifamily office was, and it wasn't too common, and it was a bit of, I guess, a leap of faith. But I joined in the group servicing ultra high net worth individuals. And what I've seen over the years, while that was sort of early stages of multifamily offices, it's really blossomed if you think of the last, especially 15, 20 years. For the reason that single family offices tend to be quite expensive, and there tend to be a lot of family dynamics as you go. I was fortunate enough to get there quite early and started as an advisor in the family office, and then ultimately was running the single family office. And to the point that it became more popular, Goldman Sachs actually acquired our company about 20 years ago because they wanted to do more for the individuals beyond investment advisory or investment banking. And so what I've seen over the years is just an explosion of investment in this space because it fills a need. And it's really become a viable alternative, I guess I would say at this point, to single family offices. And to the point in that, I would say 30 years ago, if you had $100 million, you were thinking about setting up a single family office. I would say today, you're not thinking about that unless you're probably over $500 million or $1 billion. And so there's this world in between where maybe it's just not sufficient for the wealth advisor, but it's maybe not justifiable for a single family office. The other thing I would say is technology has completely allowed the need for scale, the need for investment in technology just to keep up with the complexities, frankly, of managing complex situations and wealth has driven the ability for large companies to invest heavily in technology where individuals may not go to that same degree. And so there's real advantage of going to a multifamily office, I feel, at this point.
Thanks, Tim. Let's talk about the Rockefeller side of it. Obviously, a family that has, and a number of families here today will be thinking, how do we maintain our wealth through the generations? That's part of the story, but it's also the things that the Rockefeller family have learned that are now being applied through Rockefeller Capital Management. So perhaps you can just give us a quick brief run through of the history of that, where you are today.
Yeah, there's quite a few books on this, but the Rockefeller Family Office is the oldest family office in the United States. Started in 1882, now on 7 generations. And as the generations has evolved, the family office has evolved. And to that point, the first generation, John D. Rockefeller, was a wealth creator, and it really had, a family, but it was a limited family, if you will, at the time. And then it passes down to John D. Jr., and he really was a philanthropist of the family, if you think about that. So much involved at that time, whether it was, donating land for the United Nations or national parks or creating universities really around the globe. To creating Rockefeller Center, building that. The family office was involved in all of those components. And then you get to the brothers, the next generation down, the third generation, and all of a sudden you go from one family to now 5 different families that need services. And you go to the next generation, which was the cousins, and now you're talking about multiples of that. And there became a practicality that was, first off, some family members wanted to do something different. So not everyone wanted the family office. The other is just the cost of running it. As you pay the inheritance tax, as things go, it tends to get expensive. And so in the 1970s, it opened up to a multifamily office, which is a hard thing for a family office to go through. It goes from your family office to a for-profit motive, and that's different. But with the multifamily office in the 70s, they did a couple of things. They extended their asset management business to non-family members. And they created two trust companies to sustain the wealth through fiduciary over generations. And they opened that up to non-family members. And so all of a sudden, the Rockefeller family welcomed in a lot of other families. And they did a nice job growing that and really being able to sustain the family office for themselves as well along the way. Fast forward to today, it's the third evolution of the Rockefellers. In 2018, our CEO, Greg Fleming, teamed up and bought Rock & Co., which was the old multifamily office, and created a merchant bank and created a wealth management business, a broker-dealer, in addition to the family office and the asset management businesses. And what that's allowed us to do is really to attract more clients and open up, one, from the fact that now we have an investment banking solution, which is quite interesting for entrepreneurs. And two, we just have, more access to more clients through our wealth management division, having clients come over. And the reason these advisors are coming over to the Rockefeller Capital Management at this point is they want to do more for their clients. They recognize tax planning is really important, succession planning, avoiding the inheritance, philanthropic planning, and where can they get those services? And so we've opened up Rockefeller Capital Management to be able to provide essentially what the Rockefeller family was used to over the last 100+ years and trying to extend that to other families.
Thanks, Tim. And let's talk about the clients. I know you've done some work recently talking to your clients, surveying them and finding out what they really want, what they're after. So there are one or two slides here, which I might move out of the way a little bit so you can all see. But talk us through what you've learned and what your clients want at the moment.
Yeah, we try to do a survey every couple of years just to find out how the clients are thinking and how the world is evolving. And we did one just about a month and a half ago just to get the latest iteration. At the end of the day, clients want results and they want great service. I mean, at the highest level, that's really what they're looking for and someone they can trust. But beyond that, more specifically, the things that we heard from the clients that they value the most is up here on the screen. And, the first is investment performance. Investment management is critical. Everyone is worried about making sure that money sustains over generations, and it's a very hard thing to do with the compounding tax effect. So portfolio management is critical. But the other was the estate planning and structuring, tax structuring that gets set in place, setting up trusts and otherwise to maximize the after-tax dollars over generations. The other is, as you'll see here, client reporting and technology. As boring as that sounds, really is critical to families of great wealth. Keeping track of every single dollar and managing it very carefully is the bedrock of family office services typically, and making sure they treat their own personal life like a business, and you have to have great reporting to do that. And then the other is wealth strategy and financial planning. Financial planning, I really think about as cash flow planning over time. And at the end of the day, no matter how much wealth they have, people tend to live to their means and they tend to spend accordingly. And money is always a concern. And that is the one thing I've learned over my time. No matter how much money, it's always something you got to plan for. And so financial planning has become of paramount importance as well.
Thanks. Let's drill down a little bit, Tim, into some of those different areas. Let's talk about the technology side of things, as you mentioned. How is technology transforming the way that wealth managers deal with their clients?
Well, back in the day, it was Excel, or maybe Lotus 123, depending on your era. And today, it's much more sophisticated. It still is not perfect, but companies like an Adipar or others that are out there, there's a whole cottage industry of trying to come up with the greatest technology for consolidated reporting on a more scalable basis for complex clients. And so I think that's important. But the other with technology is real-time access. Opening an account the same day, fingerprints for cybersecurity protection as opposed to phone calls, information sharing through, making sure it's easy to kind of transport back and forth on a secure basis. It runs the gamut, but technology at the end of the day is probably of paramount importance in order to be competitive in this marketplace. Because if you're not, and you got to still do things out of Excel and otherwise, you're just going to be left behind. And so I think that we found that technology is an investment that had to be made. And I would think part of the reasons the Rock & Co. sold to Rockefeller Capital Management is the need for infusion of capital into technology and talent, but primarily technology.
We're going to talk quite a lot today, and Lily mentioned in her opening remarks about dealing with the next generation.
Yeah.
You already mentioned that Rockefeller has a history of transitioning through generations, but what are you seeing as the particular needs of this next generation?
Yeah, this is, first off, I don't think we did a great job connecting with the next generation. Strange as that sounds, since you would assume that everyone felt like it was their family office, you really have to prioritize the next gen. if you're going to attract the next gen as clients. We can no longer take for granted that an inheritance is going to go and the family members are going to be content working with their parents' advisor. I think that has changed a lot. And part of it's Google, part of it's people search and they do their own thing, and they're smart and they're challenging and they're thinking about the world a little differently. I would say in particular around that is technology, number one, but two, from my vantage point in the US in particular, I know Europe, being so far ahead of the U.S. in this, sustainable investing or ESG investing is integral for the millennials and for the next gen. The other is just in terms of engaging them. It's not a quarterly sit down going through a financial review that they're looking for the most part. It's events, it's networking, it's interesting content. And so we put together a next gen advisory council for the specific purpose. We got about 30 next gen family members that are part of that. And we get together on a quarterly basis just to learn from them in terms of what's important, how they're thinking about it, and how we should be evolving. But we've prioritized next gen. And the key to prioritizing is get them there, do some fun events, have some networking, but also stay persistent. If you do one event a year and you hope that that's going to attract, it's probably not enough. And so for us, we try to be very intentional and we try to be very persistent in terms of learning from them as much as perhaps they're going to be learning from us. And I think that's been a two-way street that's been helpful here.
You mentioned sustainability. I think I'm right in saying that the Rockefeller Group actually coined the term impact investing.
Yeah, the Rockefeller Asset Management, and we have Chip Montgomery here from Rockefeller Asset Management. We just opened up in London late last year. The Rockefeller family did coin the term impact investing. And the one thing I've always valued and appreciated with the Rockefeller family is they are about doing good with their wealth. There's a purpose for money. And they really focus intentionally on what to do. And part of that was investing in sustainable causes. And they coined the term, we want to have impact with our investing. And that was about 25 to maybe even 30 years ago at this point. And to that point, they created Climate Solutions Fund. Gosh, over 20 years ago, they created the Ocean Fund. So they're really ahead of the curve in that regard. And, I think from our vantage point, it's baked into our culture in terms of how we think about the world. So we are intentional and we're integrated with ESG in our portfolios. That not every client of Rockefeller is as passionate as the Rockefeller family. We understand that, but we want to make sure there's optionality for those who truly are to have, can have a complete diverse portfolio managed with their ESG goals and preferences. And so we've spent a lot of time, in addition to having our own in-house asset management, we have third-party external managers, and we're constantly looking for those as well that would be appropriate.
We're going to run out of time in a second. I just wondered what your clients are saying about the current global environment. I mean, we heard, and we all know there's some worrying times, not just inflation, but geopolitics, the end of globalization. What are your clients thinking about that, and what are you advising them around it?
Yeah, I think our clients tend to be very global. They're global citizens, I think, in many ways, given the wealth and given the thought. And I think it's become very divisive in the United States, as you may well know. And I think there's concern. I think there is concern about supply chain. I think there's concern about inflation, the same as we just heard. But I think for most of the families that we're working with, they're long-term investors. They're thinking about investments over the next 50 years or 100 years, not maybe over the next 5 or 10. And they're allowed to allocate more monies to private investment vehicles and things of that nature. So they tend to be longer-term thinkers, and they tend to be, I think, balanced in their approach. And I think at the end of the day, they, appreciate that, this is a difficult time right now, but I don't, from my standpoint, no one's really changing course, in terms of how they're thinking about their lives or their investments.
Thanks, Stephen. Just finally, talk us through the next evolution. Obviously,
Yeah.
Rockefeller itself is an evolution of some sort. It's a family office which is attaching some elements of investment banking, allowing your clients to maybe have access to private market investments that are becoming important. We'll have today speaking other well-established multi-generational private banks. We'll have private banks which are part of a much bigger global banking platform. What's the next evolution in the model?
I find it interesting that some of the bigger banks in the United States, at least, have de-emphasized family office services, whether it's Wells Fargo and their Abbott Downing kind of shutting that down, or PNC with theirs. So while there's more wealth accumulation happening than ever, I do think there's lesser and lesser opportunities for that. So I think the multifamily office continues to grow. I think there'll be more consolidation. I think there'll be some major players globally. And I think that this is because there's a need. I think the virtual family office, if you start hearing that, I think that is the next evolution. So multifamily offices, you tend to maybe do the bill pay and the tax prep and all of that in-house. With a virtual family office, you're going to go with the best of each, and you're going to stick to your knitting, whatever that is. But you can handle a very comprehensive approach with the clients, but you're going to work with partners to do that. And I think we're already seeing a lot of that, and we'll see more of that as we go. But I think this becomes a trend that gets bigger over time.
Well, thank you, Tim, and thanks for sharing your insights today. Good luck with the launch of Rockefeller in London,